know Hollywood is no stranger to the reboot. A whiff of $1 and Hollywood will whip out whatever franchise has been long covered in dust and nostalgia and remake the thing wholesale and send it our way with a new spit shine and drooling for our hard-earned cash. Sometimes it works really, really well, while other times, But hey, what would the games industry be if they too didn't attempt to lunge at our nostalgia glands and rake up some of that sweet cash with reboots too? And while the games industry is definitely prone to some horrendous remakes and reboots, they have some excellent ones as well. So today, let's try and remain a little positive and look at my top 7 video game reboots of all time. Except it's my opinion and probably not in a definitive list, but let's So I'm going to knock out the controversial ones right out of the gates. Yes, I know Fallout 3 is technically a sequel. I mean, it has the number 3 right there in the title, but for all intents and purposes, Fallout 3 is a total and complete reboot and relaunch of a venerable franchise long ignored. Fallout 1 and 2 were top-down isometric CRPGs, and for those who are curious, C means computer, in the same vein as Baldur's Gate, Planescape, and more. But when Bethesda got their hands on the franchise, in their mind, it was time to reinvent the series, bringing it more in line with their wildly popular and massively successful Elder Scrolls franchise. And so, with Fallout 3, we ventured into the capital wasteland. Long gone was a top-down isometric view, and in its place a first-person camera angle with the option to go third-person, with real-time but pausable combat, VATS still wholly intact, a huge open world to explore with plenty of secret areas, and teddy bears that told their own stories, some of the toughest choices to make in a game at the time, and a reinvigoration of an awesome franchise. And Three Dog and his classic music. I don't want to set the world. Don't put the music in, Dean. Copyrights and all that. And while the main story overall was relatively weak and a total underuse of Liam Neeson, dear old dad, Fallout 3 still brought back many fans of the old and a slew of new ones to the franchise. And without it, honestly, we might not even have the arguably best modern Fallout game in existence. Fallout New Vegas. This is the last sequel, I promise. Sorta. This one might be a bit harder to sell than Fallout 3, but hear me out, fam. There were 7 years between Resident Evil 3 and Resident Evil 4. Sure, we had a bunch of games in between, and arguably even a new main entry with Resident Evil 0, but it was becoming really clear that gaming was heading into a new and interesting direction with the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. Games were truly experimenting with new things, and the old school tank controls and sluggish combat in previous survival horror games like Resident Evil or Silent Hill were just no longer holding up to the modern test. They needed to do something big, different, while also trying to appeal to old and new fans alike. So, in comes Resident Evil 4, an over-the-shoulder camera angle, smooth, fast-paced combat, exciting new enemies, all while maintaining the quintessential elements from the older Resident Evils. Narrow corridors, crazy weaponized bioweapons, nonsensical and cheesy story. It successfully merged what was loved with the old and what people wanted out of something new. There was no question that Resident Evil 4 rebooted Resident Evil in a great way, and the 7,000 re-releases of Resident Evil 4 are kind of evident of that. And it would remain the best Resident Evil for a long time, as Capcom apparently took every wrong lesson from Resident Evil 4 and created the monstrosities known as Resident Evil 5 and 6. And let's not even mention Operation Raccoon City. All would look grim for Resident Evil until the Baker family arrived.
God damn it. I bet it's that cop again.
Goddamn pigs. I'm coming back for you.
I had long since been out of the Mortal Kombat scene when the Mortal Kombat reboot happened in 2011. The games over time had become messy, both in terms of story and mechanics, and the last Mortal Kombat I can remember playing before this one was the one where I think you could tag people in, and it wasn't nearly as brutal or violent as the older Mortal Kombats. In fact, the only thing I remember about playing that game was sitting next to my friends in his house and trying to convince them that Dragon Ball Z was a better show than things that were on TV, and none of them enjoyed anime like I did, so I brought over my Dragon Ball Z fighting game, Budokai 1, and tried to convince them of that by playing it with them, and I just think I drove them further away from anime, but that has nothing to do with Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat was in dire need of some love, and NetherRealms apparently also realized this. So in 2011, Mortal Kombat got a fresh start with a game simply titled Mortal Kombat, which has to be some sort of reboot cliche. The fighting mechanics in Mortal Kombat Reboot were refined and became much more fast-paced, while also becoming much easier to pull off impressive combos, making it easier for newer players to step in, while also maintaining enough depth for those who truly put in some practice to stand above the rest. It also brought back a lot of the hyper-violence that was missing from some of the more recent games, with things like X-ray moves, a super move that allowed you to see the bones cracking and breaking as the blows landed from your onslaught of attacks, and it was awesome. The story was also rebooted, bringing it back to the very beginning and retelling the first 3 games with twists and changes along the way, so for those who for some reason really liked Mortal Kombat lore could get some new exciting surprises. It was actually really well done, and one of the only fighting games in memory that I remember playing and finishing the story mode for because of how well they did it. Mortal Kombat is clearly an example of a reboot done right. Fatality.
Ever a dull moment, huh, Sully?
See this? This is what Tomb Raider should have been when the 360 and PS3 era hit. Not this. Wow. But Square Enix, the slow learners that they are, would take until 2013 to figure out what people wanted from Tomb Raider. No, not that. Well, I mean, yeah, probably some people, but also no, not that. People wanted great gameplay, an exciting and slightly outlandish Indiana Jones-esque story, gorgeous graphics, and the Tomb Raider reboot had all of that in spades. Not only that, but Laura herself became more human and less cartoonish overall, with a pretty thrilling and fun origin story to kick off her new game series. And remember how I said Hollywood can't get enough reboots? They also can't stop making video game movies. And this Tomb Raider reboot gets one, apparently. Ugh. So I know I said Resident Evil 4 was the last sequel on this list, but I have a hard time calling Wolfenstein The New Order a sequel anyway. It might be, but honestly, I don't even think it is a sequel to the old games as far as I know, but I wanted to cover my bases by saying, hey, don't hate me. But Wolfenstein marks the beginning of my top 3 reboots in video games, and I only just recently played through this awesome game mere months ago over on Twitch. In a time where first-person shooters are a dime a dozen, it was going to take a lot for Wolfenstein to shine through, but holy hell, does Wolfenstein knock it out of the park. At a time where FPSs are serious as hell, devoid of any color and pretty by the numbers at this point, Wolfenstein is silly in the best possible way. The story is both campy and has a lot of emotional punch, with characters that you grow to love and hate throughout the entire game. You can dual-wield machine guns and tear through Nazis, and the Nazis themselves have mechs and robots and mechanical dogs that are also half real and all kinds of weird mystical machinery crap. Wolfenstein never took itself seriously and made sure the player was having fun while also feeling like a total badass the entire time. Plop you in a room with exciting new weapons, a huge map, grenades, classic health packs all over to pick up like they were in the 90s, while delivering a campy but entertaining story, and Wolfenstein was the perfect reboot to the age-old classic, remaining true to its roots but giving way to new ground all at once. But let us not forget id Software's other cherished child, not to be left out of the mix in any way. 2016 saw the release and reboot of Doom. Everything I said about Wolfenstein before is almost perfectly translated to Doom, except remove the Nazis and replace them with demons. After Doom 3, where we saw Doom attempt to add gravitas to a story about a gate to hell opening on Mars, where demons spewed forth and one guy was what stood between them and Earth's annihilation, all while changing it from a fast-paced shooter to a slow horror game with guns instead, and oh yeah, Doom was in a weird place back then. And look, I actually kind of liked Doom 3. It scared the pants off of me, even though some of the logic didn't make sense. For instance, you couldn't hold a flashlight and a gun at the same time. None of your guns had lights on them. I don't think that it was a bad game. It just wasn't Doom. And early art and even some cutscenes from what was once going to be Doom 4 seemed to be initially sticking to that style of gameplay. Serious, horror, and all too not doomy. Until the whole thing was scrapped, actually, and instead the dev team decided to take Doom back to its roots and what made it fun with the reboot. Right from the opening of the game, the player is locked to a table with metal bracers and a demon is heading over to murder you. But you're Doom Guy. You rip your arm free, you punch the demon in the head and watch as it explodes, freeing yourself to do what Doom Guy does best. Kill demons with big, silly guns. And kill demons with big, silly guns you do. My number one reboot may come as no surprise to some of my regular viewers, but XCOM Enemy Unknown is my personal favorite video game series reboot of all time. The original and even some of its sequels are absolute classics, and if you can get past the very 90s aesthetic, the gameplay, mystery, fear of fighting an unknown foe, all while scrambling to defend Earth as best you can, is timeless and incredibly fun even today. But there is no denying that, while deep and complex, some of original XCOM's mechanics were a little cumbersome, and to more casual and modern strategy gaming fans, difficult to tear apart and get into. XCOM Enemy Unknown, however, takes what's best of XCOM and keeps it firmly intact. The horror of aliens more powerful than you, the creeping thought that one bad encounter could be the end of your favorite, most powerful soldier, managing upgrades while trying to keep pace with the aliens and their invasions, while modernizing the mechanics. Oh, it's so good. While time units may have been a classic way to manage your soldiers in XCOM, there's no denying how consuming and confusing managing each soldier and their allotted resources could be. With the reboot, each soldier has only 2 moves each turn. Weapon upgrades were universal when you bought them, and a lot of the clunkiness had just been overall cleaned up. You still have to manage countries and their safety to keep them as part of the XCOM program and their funding, and all the fear and difficulty in doing so remains perfectly intact in this reboot. But the complexities of the 90s PC gaming had been notably removed, and it's wonderful for it. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this little list. The next review is already in the works, so look forward to that in a couple of weeks. If you enjoyed it, make sure you check out this video right here. And how about you hit that subscribe button right there? And how about you don't do anything else? Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.